Hey everyone, it's Allie, and I wanted to make a video talking about one of my concerns with Path of Exile's 2 current endgame. Now, I personally feel like it's doing a lot of really good things, and I feel like they hit the mark on quite a lot of it, but there is one specific problem with Path of Exile's 2 endgame that is going to ruin the fun for a lot of players in my opinion. I have high hopes that GG is going to change this, but I do want to make a video ranting / discussing it so people are aware of this to hopefully generate a little bit more discussion about it and to just let people know how Path of Exile 2's current endgame actually is. And I also want to talk about my plans for what we're going to be doing over the next few days while we wait for GG to come back from the holidays to hopefully answer and or change a lot of this. So with that said, why don't we start talking about, well, what is causing me to make this video? Path of Exile's 2 progression currently is really good. I like what they did with Endgame, and I feel like the progression curve from Tier 1 Waystones to Tier 15 Waystones is a massive step up from the horrible system that was mapping in PoE 1, where you had to know 7 different weird variables about how maps drop, and you had to use a specific passive tree, and you had to jump through 13 different loops to be able to get all the maps that you needed for completion in order to actually get to the true endgame of the game. At PoE 2, on the other hand, we're simply just doing Tier 1 Waystones. And when we do them, Tier 2 Waystones can drop inside the maps. And then you do your Tier 2 Waystones, and you get Tier 3 Waystones drop inside the maps, and so on and so forth. Making the progression really simple, really to the point, and honestly really fun, given that we have all the precursor towers to play with as we go along, and all the different tablets, and all the different league modifiers that we come across. They've done a great job with early progression, but the issue arrives when you get to endgame. Once you get yourself to Tier 15 Waystones, you really are on a very specific track for how they intend you to keep progressing and start juicing and making all the content more difficult. Once you do get to T15s, the game heavily incentivizes you to go and fight map bosses first as your first progression point to unlock all the passive points in the map boss tree. And while those have their own issues with current acquisition, and given that they're pretty buggy and for some people they sometimes work and sometimes don't, they're pretty good to pick up, as you definitely do notice the boss is giving you more and more loot. And then once you're finished getting yourself 8 out of the 10 passive points in that tree, your next point of progression is to either go and fight the Pinnacle Boss of the game, or to go and do some of the other league mechanics such as Ritual or Delirium, build up their key to be able to do their Pinnacle content, and then do said Pinnacle content such as a Breach Stone for Breach or a Simulacrum for Delirium, to then get passive points in their respective trees to be able to progress that mechanic further and to be able to get more currency out of it. In PoE 1, a big issue was that the late game was very much gated to the majority of the player base. A lot of high-end strategies either required you to have an insane build or to have an insane amount of money to put into it to get it going, or required you to do something like Magic Find. I would say probably around 40 to 50% of all strategies were fairly accessible to the majority of players, with another 20 to 30% being somewhat accessible if you had a little bit of money, and then only about 10 to 20% of all strategies were super gated and closed off to only the 1% of the 1%. In my opinion, in PoE 2, that issue has gotten a lot worse, to where now, instead of only 10 to 20% of farming strategies being gated to 1% of 1%, it feels more like over half of the endgame is currently gated to the 1% of the 1%, and then 50%, if not less, of the endgame is currently accessible to everyone else. And while you might just say, Allie, you basically just described PoE 1. Yeah, kind of, but in PoE 1, even though only a tiny portion of the strategies were locked for the 1% of the 1%, you still were able to make a decent amount of money, to where in PoE 2 right now, it feels like with the half the strategies that you do have access to, you make no money, and then the other half the strategies that only the 1% of the 1% can do make multiple times more money than you'd ever be able to. GG is trying to make PoE 2 substantially more new player friendly, and I feel like they're going about this the wrong way, and it needs to change immediately. A big issue with all this is just how difficult it is to get those passive points for the league content passive trees on the side of the main Atlas tree itself. For example, currently, if you want to go get yourself some points in Delirium to make your Deliriums better, you need to go do a Simulacrum. Currently, a Simulacrum is worth about 250 Exalted Orbs or so, and well, yesterday I went and tried one for myself, and I could tell you it was fairly difficult, and I could tell you that you were not making anywhere close to 250 Exalted Orbs back, meaning that the price of Simulacrum is pretty much solely priced around people purchasing it to then complete it, then get access to passive points. These passive points are so strong that you effectively are putting yourself at a massive disadvantage farming the content in comparison to somebody farming the content with the passive points. A great example of this is Would You Like to See My Face? This doubles the amount of Simulacrum splinters that you get from your maps, effectively doubling the majority of the profitability from doing any sort of Delirium content in your maps. And if you don't have 4 passive points to be able to get yourself, would you like to see my face? And somebody else is farming the exact same content as you, but they are suddenly making twice the amount of money that you are. This issue of 1, the simulacrums are too expensive to even attempt, and 2, they're too difficult to even get on your own, given you're getting maybe 5 splinters at most per map that you do, just completely cuts off the majority of players from even being allowed to even attempt to get these passive points for themselves. Why would you go and attempt a simulacrum, which costs you 250 exalted orb, which is most likely a very large chunk of currency for you and the majority of the player base, when you just sell it instead, buy upgrades for your build, and just keep farming the same content as before? The game is basically telling you that you're not allowed to realistically interact with any sort of delirium and, well, any sort of content outside of simply just getting a tier 15 waystone, putting it into your map device, and then running the map, maybe getting a deli mirror or a breach in there that's not going to be that good, and then that's about it. Your only real form of juicing for the majority of players is going to be the boss tree, because you can actually get the passive points in that in a fair and reasonable way that doesn't require you to potentially waste hundreds of exalted orbs for one attempt at it, or potentially have to farm for days to get enough simulacrum splinters, for example, to even attempt it. This issue is even made worse by the whole 1 portal per whatever content you're doing that GG has forced upon everyone. Honestly, spending 250 exalted orbs for a simulacrum isn't the end of the world, given just how much extra currency those passive points would give me. Yeah, I hate that the simulacrums themselves are just not going to get to give you any sort of relevant currency to even make up even a tiny little bit of what you put into it, but if I was able to actually complete my simulacrum, I would just see the 250 exalted orbs as an investment into me then potentially being able to make more money. The issue here comes in the fact that simulacrums are pretty damn difficult, and the fact that if you die a singular time inside of them, you lose the content and then that's it. You just lost 250 exalted orbs. This is such a stupid implementation of the system, as not only is it expensive to try, but is unbelievably punishing with you only having 1 attempt at getting your passive points to begin with. This means you need to massively overgear and outlevel the content, meaning you have to stick with farming normal maps and killing map bosses, and then that's it. You're not allowed to have any other fun until your build is so strong that you can go stomp the pinnacle content in each of the different league mechanics to then finally make the league mechanics more rewarding. It's horrible. This even applies to Pinnacle Boss itself. Yesterday on my stream, I wasted 9 divine orbs because it costs you 3 divine orbs per attempt of the Pinnacle Boss currently on just dying to a overtuned / bugged mechanic of the fights where you're supposed to stand inside of a circle, and if you're not within that circle, you will get one shot. But the boss at the same time, and every content creator seems to be complaining about the same exact thing, just does a frontal directly into the circle you're supposed to stand in, effectively giving you no safe spot to stand in. The Pinnacle Boss currently is unkillable by almost every build in the game, with the exception of the few builds that can kill the Pinnacle Boss so quickly that it doesn't even have a chance to do that overlap that is currently unlivable. The Pinnacle Boss literally requires you to overgear it so much that you have to then be able to skip that mechanic, that it just has the same issue as all the other league content, to where if I want to do a simulacrum, I need to massively overgear the system for me to be able to actually do it. It's really frustrating and it feels horrible, and I hate that I basically wasted a day's worth of divine orbs yesterday attempting to make my farming strategies better, only for the game to either just kill me through something really stupid, or to just kill me through something really stupid and basically waste my money. This feels even worse than Solo Self-Found, where even attempting to try any of the pinnacle content, whether it's the true final boss of the game or the pinnacle content for the other league mechanics, literally takes you half a week to a week to even farm enough of the items required to get in to have one attempt at it. And then you're just going to go in and then just die to something stupid. And now you're back to farming the same thing for the next half a week to a week before you're allowed to attempt it again. In my opinion, this has to change immediately, as it's very unreasonable to basically waste days upon days of farming or ungodly amounts of currency for a singular portal and a singular attempt at trying to get your strategy to now make you more money. While in PoE 1, if you want to do Exarch or Eater, your first attempt at it, you had infinite attempts for free until you managed to do the boss. It's stupid gating juicing like this behind basically unreachable goals for most people. And, well, all we can do is just hope that when they get back from holidays, they will address these concerns. Until then, all we can really do is either just keep farming maps the way we normally are, throw our money into endgame content to attempt to then be able to do other strategies, or just wait for GG to respond about all this and just play other builds. I'm going to choose to take option 2, where I'm going to just go play some other builds. I'm going to put Gas Arrow away for now, as I feel like the build is pretty much solved and there's really nothing left for me to theorycraft on the build other than just go through motions of upgrading the gear. And I'm just going to have fun with some other builds over the next week or two to, well, basically stall for time until GG does something about Endgame. I am going to be leveling a Gemling Legionnaire on stream today, and it's going to be a build I am looking forward to so much, as the concept behind it is really cool, where we're just simply stacking as many attributes as possible. And I think it has some potential to be a really cool build that a lot of people should be able to follow along as well. There will be daily updates on this build, just like how we've done for Gas Arrow. And then once I feel like the build's at a good place, we'll do a full build guide on it for people to be able to enjoy. I'd really recommend you dropping by today's stream and watching along with what we're going to be doing, as I feel like this is going to be a build most people are not going to want to miss out on, and it should be a pretty good time. With that said, kitties, I hope you enjoyed my little rant on what is currently wrong with Endgame and Path of Exile 2. I hope this hopefully generates a little bit more discussion and buzz around the topic, as I don't feel like enough people are talking about it, and I'm going to stay hopeful that everything is going to get better over the next few weeks. With that said, kitties, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.